You may be asking yourself, what do you do for Halloween without your baby? If you just experienced baby loss, you might be dreading this day. So today, Jeff and I are going to share with you some of the challenges that many families of baby loss experience for Halloween. And stick around for the second half of the episode because we're going to share with you 5 tips to help you navigate this Halloween.
Well, hello and welcome to our, number 4? This is number 4 podcast. It is.
I think I thought we said number 4 was the last one, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, this is number 4.
Okay.
Oh, you know what it was? It was the who we are, what do we do?
That's number 4?
Well, remember?
Oh.
It was going to be number 4, but now we're switching it up for Halloween.
Right.
That's right.
So this is 4.
All right.
Okay,
So again,
now that
welcome.
we figured that out.
So again, welcome to our latest podcast. I am Jeff, and we are Jeff. Got that messed up. I'll get it right. We're only 4 episodes in. So
sure.
we are Jeff and
Tony
Bravek, the founders of our little Sparrows pregnancy and infant loss support.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here we are, the week leading up to Halloween. So our last episode, we actually started talking about the holidays. And so in general, we talked about, 5 ways to approach the holiday season. So now we're diving a little deeper. We're going to go into a specific holiday, and this one is Halloween.
Right.
Right.
So let's talk about some of those challenges.
Right. Yeah. So we'll start with the challenges, but again, just like Tony said a moment ago, stick around for the second half of the episode. That's when we're going to give you 5 tips, 5 suggestions for helping you to navigate the holiday.
Right.
But first, we'll talk about those challenges.
Yes. And this list is not like a full list. This is just some of the things that we've experienced ourselves or that we've had, friends of ours share with us that's something that they've experienced for Halloween. So there's more out there, but this is what we know.
Right.
So one of the first things, which is kind of the main ones, is that it's a child-centered, family-focused holiday. So a lot of kids dressing up for Halloween, they get to pick their costume, and it's a lot of fun, family affair. A lot of families like to go together. So it might cause you to kind of wonder or just kind of feel like maybe you're missing out on something when because you don't have your baby with you. You're not able to have that, pick their costume and, plan together with other family members or friends to go trick-or-treating, that kind of thing.
Right.
So there's that element of like, I'm missing, I'm missing my baby and I'm missing out on participating in all of these fun activities that are, geared towards families and kids. I
mean, and with that said, that could come in maybe a little form of stress or even anxiety or a mix of both.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's definitely, anxiousness, not knowing what to do. Maybe you feel obligated or, the past experience has, you've been in a part of those traditions, but this year maybe you feel different. And so there could be the feeling of obligation that you
Which
need
is
to
exactly
uphold
what we
those.
talked about last episode. Those expectations, right? To be happy, to be joyful.
Right.
To do the party, to do the event or whatever it may be, to do the holiday, to be there. So yeah, I totally agree. It's definitely a child-focused, centered holiday.
Yeah. And I think too, for once, every year you kind of wonder, or at least I kind of wondered, like, what would Olivia have dressed up as this year, or what would she have chosen? You know, so every year there's kind of that sense of wonder, like what would our baby have picked? What would our baby have decided to be? Would she like princesses? Does she like scary things? There's a lot of things we just don't know. Right. And so there's that element.
I can associate with that completely. I think initially I didn't feel that way when we first lost Olivia because she was our firstborn. We had no existing children. I noticed a big difference with James, with James. He came actually after our first miscarriage.
Right.
So we had lost Olivia, then we had our miscarriage, then James. And he'll be 6. But what I was getting to is I didn't notice a difference or a shift in how I saw, because we'd sit out on our driveway, we'd have the fire pit out there, and And we'd have the bowl of candy, and I'd have the smoke machines going and stuff.
Yeah.
On the front porch and on the side of the house coming out of the the fence or whatever, right? The whole orchestrated thing, and you'd see the parents walk by, and the dad would be in his dog costume, and he's holding the baby.
Yeah.
And I would see that when we first lost Olivia, and I would think, I don't have my baby, right? Kind of thing. But since then, with James, now I think of, well, what would she have been dressed as? Because I know what James dressed as,
right?
Or you dressed him initially. Wasn't he a crab and you were a squid? Wait, no, you were an angel.
I was a jellyfish.
You were a jellyfish,
and he was a lobster.
Yeah, see, I got that wrong.
That's one of the costumes, not
right. But it wasn't until we had James, is what I'm trying to say. Until we had a living child with us, and I could physically connect my, visually and physically, the senses, right, are everything. And when I see James dressed up, when I hear him goofing around on Halloween, knock knock, give me candy, at the trick or treat, give me candy. It's like then I think about what Olivia would have dressed as, what Olivia would have been like, because she's older, right, by 2 years, almost three actually, yeah. So there, yeah, I totally agree, and it's different for everyone. I think that kind of goes without saying,
right? Yeah, I think everyone experiences that to some degree, more or less.
Right.
All right. So the next challenge is that you simply just don't feel up for it. And whether that's because you're not up to opening the door and seeing kids, every time, or maybe it's just energy-wise. Even though it's kind of like, oh, you could choose to be at home or whatnot, it still takes energy to go and greet kids and give them candy, and especially when grief is so intense and raw, your energy levels are, it's up and down a lot. So you really need to take into account what your capacity is. What do you desire to do? Do you have the energy for it? Do you even want to do it?
Right.
Or do you just want to lay low and just maybe spend time with your spouse or partner or with close friends and family, or just just kind of do your own thing. You don't even have to do anything Halloween related. You can just, do whatever you choose that is appealing to you. Cool. So energy is one thing. And like we had said, we chose to stay at home and be quiet. We put a bowl of candy out with a sign for kids to help themselves. And that did not last long. I think I went back out like 45 minutes later and it was all gone. Of course, they're just going to put a whole handful of candy in their bag. But that's what we chose to do that first year. I think the second year we did participate. If I remember right, we did.
Yeah.
And we stayed at home, but we handed out candy that year. So I think again, it's just taking into account what you're up for, what do you want to do, and also, I mean, if you have living children and they want to participate in Halloween,
that's a whole other variable.
That's something you need to have a conversation with your kids and spouse. Maybe you can arrange to have them, another family member take them or a friend, and so that they can still participate. But if you're not feeling up for it, then that way you kind of have, a way out. Yeah, and so to not fully participate, or maybe go with them for a little bit, but then have someone take them the rest of the way, kind of thing. And so it just depends. I think this is where communication would be good. Needs to be clear. And even
I mean, it comes back to the knowing your boundaries, knowing what you can do, what you can't do, and then obviously, hopefully, it's your spouse or it's a a family member or a friend that's your support, right? Yeah. And they could be the one that you go to and say, "Can you help me out with the kids?" Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah. I mean, that would be ideal.
Yeah. Okay. And if your kids are older, then this might be a time to just share with them that your appropriateness is. But I think it is.
I think the best thing is to be honest, to be truthful.
Yeah.
I know in our community, something that's hard to learn is I didn't lose my baby. My baby died. So it's not like you misplaced your baby.
Right.
So depending on the age of your children and what they're able to understand and obviously the maturity levels there, then maybe you could be honest with them and say,
Right.
because Olivia died,
Mm-hmm.
I'm devastated.
Yeah.
Instead of because we lost our your sister, my what
Right.
would have been our daughter.
Yeah. That doesn't necessarily
It's not direct.
communicate clearly
No.
to the your other children what is going on.
Right.
So I mean that in that sense, and then just saying, you know what, being honest with them, said, I just don't feel up to it this year. Is it okay if this person can take you trick or treating, or
Sure.
how do you feel about that? So having open conversation with your kids, depending how old they are and their level of understanding.
Right.
Yeah.
So obviously choosing not to celebrate the holiday is going to be different for everyone, and the reason why they would do that. But don't be I think the main thing too is don't be too hard on yourself. Don't place those expectations so high that you're letting yourself down. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Right. And you're definitely not letting down others if you're having that conversation. Instead of just not saying anything and going dark. I mean, that's different. But
yeah.
So another challenge, and this is a tricky one for me, every time I read it, but Halloween is a celebration of death. That is so true.
Yeah.
And when I say tricky, I think it's kind of a juxtaposed position. Here we want to celebrate, have fun, get in costumes, run around, giggle, laugh, play pranks on each other. It's usually a good night to do it, and go get candy.
Yeah, that's the fun part of it.
That's
the
fun
innocent
part of it. But there's also
the darker side of Halloween, which is death, and it's not just death in general. This is like scary imagery. This is haunted houses and skeletons and things like that. And though it might be the intention of it is supposed to be kind of fun for the most part, things like that can trigger emotions in us, and
for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and especially if you've had maybe a traumatic experience with miscarriage or pregnancy loss, Halloween can bring up a lot of that stuff, and it's something that is just not a pleasant thing to look at or be around.
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning, on the onset, everyone sees it as a fun time, a celebration, to get candy, to goof around with your friends. So wouldn't you think that that's kind of those two butt heads to the point that other people at first they're going to be confused, like what's the hang up? Right. They may not say it in those words, and obviously would be more sensitive than that, but I think it's tricky. I think it's tricky because it's so true. The holiday is about death,
right?
In its own right.
Baby died,
and your baby died. So other people may not get it at first. Because we've become so desensitized to the fact of the matter that Halloween is not just about goofing around and getting candy.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I think so. There's a lot more to Halloween, I think, than we even realize. We kind of see the fun, innocent part of it, but there's a lot more darkness to it. There's still the fun level of it, but it's like a darker fun, like the haunted houses and things like that. But there's definitely darker things associated with Halloween that a lot of people tend to want to stay away from. And
well, totally, because the next challenge is triggers, and those two go hand in hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we know in the back of our minds during this tough time, this time that we've been thrusted into, a new normal, where now we've experienced the death of a child. Now here comes the holiday. I mean, for us, it was right away, October 5th to the 31st. Right. It's like within weeks, we went from having Olivia, losing her the same day, and then 2.5 weeks later, 3 weeks later, here's Halloween. Right. And other people have experienced that too. Yes. And all of a sudden, knowing that the holiday is about joy and happiness and getting candy, you also see people dressed up in costumes about death and skeletons and all sorts of stuff that exemplify death. So hello, triggers. Yeah. Right? Like left and right to one degree or another, depending on what people are dressing like in your neighborhood, or
decorating their homes with.
Or if you got invited to one of those, Hallows Eve parties, that the radio stations put on. Right. And you think you're up to it. And those are pretty gruesome. I've never been to one, but from what I've seen in promos and such, you go to them and they're creepy. They're haunted houses. They're about death. it's just graphic, right? And you may think you're up to it, and you may say, I'm fine, I'm gonna go, but hello, trigger.
Yeah. And they can happen without even really not being, of course, triggers happen when you're not prepared. It's like when you least expect it to happen, something can trigger an emotion, a memory, and then you're just kind of sent down this emotional, what do you call it? Whirlwind.
Yeah, it's a spiral thing, right? It's like it's a spiral thing, and it just, unless you can immediately get away from the sensory overload, right, and get out to the car if you're at a Halloween party, or go back in your house if you're sitting on the front drive like we would do, and you can immediately separate yourself from that.
Right.
Man, the anxiety is just overwhelming. The stress, like I've experienced triggers, I've experienced PTSD, to a certain extent, and it's heart palpitating. It's very, it makes everything kind of just like sensory overload, and your brain just swirls and just wants to shut down.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. All right. So with that being said, we have some tips that hopefully can help you with the challenges of Halloween.
It's a good thing you stuck around to the second half of this episode, because now
we're in the second half.
Now we're in the second half, 16 minutes in.
Excellent.
We're going to get into the 5 tips.
All right. So tip number 1 is to be honest with yourself. And I think that's kind of what I had said before, is to, self-evaluate. What is your capacity? Energy-wise, physically, emotionally, what do you think you're up for? And it's okay to say to yourself, I don't feel up for it today. Right. Or perhaps you feel you are up for it today and you want to participate in festivities, then it's okay to do that too. I don't think there's anything wrong with having, and allowing ourselves to enjoy some, festivities and things like that. And, grief does not always have to be about, sad and heaviness. We can have, excitement and joy too, in grief as well. On to point number 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think tip number 1, being honest with yourself, is pretty straightforward, makes sense. Obviously, it goes, in my mind, it goes back to knowing your boundaries and knowing what you can do and what you can't do, but also being willing also being willing to maybe stretch yourself after some time has gone by, and say, okay, I initially I may not feel like I can do it all, but I can probably do some. Yeah. And what does that look like? You probably won't know until you show up. Yeah. Right? And give yourself an out, have that support person. Yeah. Whether it's it doesn't matter who it is. As long as you have a support person that knows what you're going through, knows what you're feeling, that you've told that you want to try this, but you're not sure how much you can do of it. And if I can't do something, here's the code word.
Right. Have a code word that's actually helpful. It's like, having a code word actually works. So actually, that's an additional tip there for you.
Right. So being honest with yourself, I think, is a great first tip to start with here. So the next tip that we have of the 5 tips is to be honest with your living children and others about expectations. Yeah. And I kind of already said that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, whether it's your support person or it's your family, it's the same thing. If you're going to be open communication with a support person, if your family, if your living children are old enough, mature enough that you feel like they can take on the conversation, have it with them, right? And obviously your spouse, your partner, the baby that died, if you're still with that parent and that parent's integral in your life, in your immediate circle, then be honest with them.
Yeah. Okay, and then with that is our tip number 3, is knowing your limits. And sometimes, obviously, you're not going to know right away, like you said. Sometimes you just don't know until you're actually in the moment what your limit is. But if you already sense that being at a Halloween event with lots of kids and families, or maybe it's like, the other event where it's, lots of scary things, lots of, imagery that's dark. If that's not appealing to you, then maybe don't go. You don't have to go. Like you said, have a friend or a person with you that supports you and that can help you if you need an out.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as if that's not appealing to you, I think that could be momentary, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could be something that years past you've always been stoked about. You've always been
Right.
like, I'm the person that loves the guy on the block that puts together the haunted house
Yeah.
that will freak you out.
Right.
And you always want to see how he one-ups himself year after year, and you want to go
Yes.
through that haunted house. I mean, that could be you,
Right.
right? But in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
you may remember enjoying that before, but not sure now.
Right.
And so that's kind of a, listen to your body thing. We talked about that last episode too. It's like you may have had a sports injury, and although on the outside the skin is healed
Mm-hmm.
and the bone is still working,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the mental game.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the mental, the emotional,
Right.
what's happening inside. And there's the whole thing where they say you got to listen to your body.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing goes with baby loss. It's trauma.
Yeah.
It's been a mental like zap to your brain, and your brain is like wrestling with those emotions that you're having in your heart, and your heart is just like broken, right? So those two things don't gel together. They actually conflict with each other,
Right.
because the brain is very logical and very problem solving, and I've got a to-do list. I'm gonna check it off as I got my things done, right? That's very black and white. Your emotions are not black and white. Your heart is not a computer, right? It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be in tune with who you are as a person. I think character, personality, who you are as a person individually. If you have a solid foundation of who you are ahead of time, I think going through something traumatic like this is different. I think at it, you're at a disadvantage, and don't take this wrong. I don't mean critically. I'm not stating this critically, but you are, I believe, in my mind, you're at a disadvantage when you don't understand yourself as well as maybe someone else understands themselves that have gone through the same experience. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. But at the end of the day, you have to take what you do know about yourself and just listen. Listen to your body and listen to your heart. And that means if you feel like crying. If you feel devastated, feel devastated. The worst thing we could ever do is say, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't be crying. I shouldn't feel broken.
Right. It's acknowledging those feelings, acknowledging them, and not saying that, if you're feeling angry about it, and not to stuff that down and say, oh, I shouldn't feel angry.
Yeah. I need to rise above it.
Yeah.
But what does that mean?
I mean, if you're feeling angry, just acknowledge it.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to sit in it for a long time, but just you can acknowledge it. That gives, even just that acknowledgement can give you some freedom from that. And so it's just kind of not necessarily, some people would say embracing the emotions, but I think acknowledging it is just allowing it to feel,
acknowledging it,
especially if this is like your first year, within that first year of grief, things this is your first year round going through all of the holidays and things that can happen. There's a lot to navigate, a lot to to process,
and a lot of this may be foreign for you, and that's and maybe it's it just wasn't something you were taught when you were growing up, right?
Totally, yeah.
Family units are all different, and that's why there's support out there. That's why there's pregnancy and infant loss community. Instagram is amazing for connecting, but then I recommend looking for something local.
Yeah.
Those nonprofits, those support groups. For us, it was Sharing Parents of Sacramento, and it still is today.
Yeah.
Even though we've started our own thing with Our Little Sparrows, it's very much the same thing, but yet Our Little Sparrows is also very different than Sharing Parents, right? Their mission and their goal is after loss. Our mission and our goal is primarily to walk alongside those who've been given that diagnosis that baby may not make it, or that baby is not gonna make it.
Right.
So no matter that outcome, Our Little Sparrows is there to walk alongside you before, during, and after the loss. And I mean, obviously, we would always recommend a family to Sharing Parents of Sacramento as well, and we do. But yeah, that's why support groups are there, because if you don't have the tools, I know this is very a guy's way of saying it, and I apologize if it's cold, But if you don't have the tools to deal with the pain, the grief, that's what support groups are there for.
Yeah.
And we would always encourage you to find one online and primarily one local,
right?
Especially pregnancy and infant loss, specific. So, yeah,
definitely, community is definitely important. So the next tip, number 4, is be kind to yourself. So knowing what now you have an idea of what your capacity is and what you're not capable of or what you want to do, just be kind to yourself, and don't feel bad if you decide to bow out of something or feel pressure.
Guilty, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think of when you say that. I feel like again, it's those expectations that we either place upon ourselves or we feel like others are placing on us. And sometimes that's true and sometimes that may not be true. But regardless, I think in general, we feel expected to do something, to be somewhere, to be a certain way, right? To respond a certain way. A lot of things.
Yeah.
And being kind to yourself is
it's allowing yourself permission
to not be okay.
To not be okay.
You've said that a lot before.
Yeah, and it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to be okay. So whatever it is that you feel, you know what I mean? Like if you feel like you're up for it, you want to go and have fun with your family and kids, that's okay. I feel like sometimes we often feel guilty, especially as as a mom. I feel guilty for wanting to have fun at certain things when I feel like, the expectation is to me that I should still be in grief over the loss of my daughter. I think we sometimes get that balance. There is a healthy balance. And I think, either way, it's like we feel pressure to be grieving or pressure to not be grieving and get over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think you spelled it out. That's life in general. There's pressures and all sorts of things.
Right. And so I think as anyone who's experienced pregnancy loss, we need to be honest with ourselves and be okay with being not okay. And if you are feeling okay that day, it's okay.
Right. And I think what you're saying is awesome in a couple of ways. Number one, it's because it exposes pre-death of our child in that traumatic experience. It exposes, the way our society puts things in a box.
Yeah.
Right. And things are in a lot of ways they're predetermined. They're preset. This is how you're supposed to act for this. This is how you're supposed to react when this happens. This is what you're supposed to do with your life. Go to school. Then go to school, go to college, get a career, and that career's got to be in certain fields because you're from this type of family or whatever, right? So what you've exposed is that, and this is what we've experienced, and a lot of families, if not all families of pregnancy and infant loss have experienced this, is that post-loss, everything's different. All those expectations of certain age in life, you're supposed to get married, you're supposed to have your first child, you're supposed to be in such and such career, you're supposed to have, such and such money for retirement. All that stuff goes out the window.
Right.
So what it does is it forces you to reevaluate what's important.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean those things are not important. I'm not saying that at all.
Right.
But it changes your social dynamic. It takes you and in a certain way, this actually, I think it's two things. It makes us the odd person out, and that may sound really bad, but it also gives us an opportunity to have a fresh outlook on life. What's important versus what's not important. What's priority versus not priority. And this goes hand in hand with being kind to yourself. Before, you may have told yourself, shape up or ship out. You may have told yourself, get back, get back into line, get back into the position.
Right.
Make sure you get your degree.
Work harder,
work smarter, not harder, all that stuff. And again, I'm not saying those things are not valid and within their own right. And in actuality, the opportunity that you have post-loss is to take those different things that you had in your mind as predetermined or required and reevaluate them and see how they still plug into your life or they don't.
Right.
And that throws a lot of people off because they're like, you were on this trajectory, then this happened, and now you're way over here.
Yeah.
But that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Good, bad, or otherwise.
Right.
We need, with the trauma that we're going through, we need to figure out the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as I was supposed to be this one person and nothing else.
Right.
We're so much more dynamic than that as human beings, which is what's amazing in life. And people go through midlife crises and change their career. Well, look, trauma is a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It changed your trajectory. It changed ours, right? And that was forced on us, the loss of Olivia.
Right.
Olivia's death was not our choice.
Mm-hmm.
But what we chose to do with it empowered us.
Right.
And that's why I want to hit home, is that although you feel devastated that you have experienced the death of a child or many children, more than one, such as we have, it doesn't mean that you're any less important or that your life can't be any less special or exciting or of value. It means there was a finality. You lost your child. They died. It's traumatic. I'm miserable. I'm broken. Now I need to figure out for myself how I piece that brokenness back together and make something beautiful out of it.
Right.
And that may not make sense to you now, but I promise you, if you keep walking a path of looking for, well, I can't promise, but anyhow, all I can say is that there's opportunity in the brokenness. All I can say is that there's opportunity to grow, to become stronger, to grow in your knowledge of yourself and understanding, to become a stronger individual from this traumatic loss, this traumatic death, and to do something positive with it, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah.
And it's an absolute opportunity that everyone has been given. And I know that sounds funky, it sounds cold, it sounds heartless, but it is true. Because no matter what, Olivia was gonna die.
Right.
So now what do we do? This is what we do.
Yeah.
And everyone has that opportunity in one way or another. Whether they get to that point of doing something different tomorrow, a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. We're all in different positions, financially, social status, whatever that is. Some of us, it takes longer to achieve what we the goal that we have to do with what we experienced.
Right.
And that's just life in general. But you don't have to be rich to make a difference.
No.
You just got to have an open heart and open mind and willingness to share with others your story, hoping that they can glean something off of it for themselves, and be there to support maybe another parent of loss. And that's like baseline.
Right. Yeah.
I said a lot.
No, it's all good.
That actually kind of goes into tip number 5.
Yeah. How to honor your baby on Halloween. And this could be anything as simple as lighting a candle for your baby, carving an extra pumpkin or painting an extra pumpkin for your baby, creating a new tradition. And so that way you're still participating in some of the Halloween events and traditions, but then you're also making a new tradition for your baby, and that's up to you as to whether you want to do that every year or not. But right. That's something that you can think, something like that is something that you can do simply. You can do every year, and then it can be, even something bigger, like Jeff has been sharing, that, we went, it didn't start out big for us. Like, we kind of took our time, and then we kind of came up to what we were going to decide to do with our little sparrows. And that's,
we started with sharing parents.
Yeah.
We started becoming volunteers, right?
Yeah.
We started small.
And then it can grow from there. You see where it goes, and then you might be inspired to do something else or completely different the next year, and that's okay. So I think,
you may just start a community garden for remembering, any child that has died of any age.
Right. And it doesn't have, even that can be big to someone. It could just be simple, just lighting a candle or, like doing an extra pumpkin or donating candy or toys to an organization that's having a Halloween event that night, or volunteering. You could do something like that. Again, taking into consideration your capacity of what you can do and what you want to do. So
cool.
Those are some ideas of how to help yourself and your family through Halloween. We hope it's been helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is the Halloween episode. We're gonna do another episode here in a couple of few weeks for Thanksgiving. We'll do another one for Christmas specific, just like we did for Halloween. So, as always, Tony and I want anyone who's listening to know that you're loved and that you're not alone, and that your baby, our babies collectively, will always be cherished, always be remembered. Yeah. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thanks.
Well, we hope you guys got value out of this episode. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. If you want to see our next episode, click or tap on the image above. And if you click or tap below, you can connect with our grief series, Pregnancy Journey, Grieving from Diagnosis to the Loss of Your Baby and Beyond. Thank you for listening.